guidelines that help keep us focused on the various areas that we might want to turn our attention to. So thank you very much for everything you do preparing those reports.
Appreciate
Right,
that.
I've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll now move to item 7.3. This is on page 219 of your agendas. This is the WRC submission on resource management reform national direction packages 1 through 3, infrastructure and development, primary sector, and freshwater. And we have Tracy May and Katrina Andrews. Thank you both. Tracy.
Morning, Madam Chair. Morning, councillors. Firstly, I would just like to thank Democracy Services and our famous Waikato celebrity, Democracy Dave, and being able to accommodate this council meeting, of course, yourselves and your calendars today, and moving it forward a week. The submissions to packages 1, 2 and 3 close on Sunday. We weren't going to bring you in on Saturday. It has been a phenomenal amount of work. We have package 4, which was released some weeks after package 1, 2 and 3, but rather than get you to sit through a different session, the team have worked phenomenally well to get these 4 packages before you, even though they are in two separate items. We do have a flotilla of staff sitting behind us who are sitting there now.
Flotilla.
It is a flotilla. Yes, a flotilla, and keeping with the maritime theme.
Nice.
That is really important to show you really the breadth of where each of these packages touches across the organisation, and it is everywhere. It is our core business in terms of implementing national direction, and this is a substantial amount of change for us to get our heads around. There are parts of the change that will affect the way we collect information, the way we develop policy, the way we implement, monitor and enforce policy, and also ourselves via Greg and the ICM Directorate as our key consent holder. So it touches across all parts of the organisation. We know this is the first in a raft of changes we're going to have to contend with and consider. And while I make no apology for 170 pages worth of submissions before you, because I've done the maths, it is really important because some of what is in these discussion documents will become operative once the government has been through the process. And we may or may not like what comes out of it, but we will not have an opportunity to challenge that again. We will be asked to implement it. There are a mix of where staff have supported, not supported areas, and Katrina will take you through some high-level themes that guided that. But what we have done, and this is in response to what Council's asked us to do in the past to submissions, where we haven't supported, we have tried to create alternatives and suggest alternatives. In talking with ministry officials, they did say to us and said to other regional councils who were on the sessions that they ran online for officials, please tell us anything that isn't working now. We don't want to do this again. We don't want it done again. We don't want every 3 years. So I was just saying to Councillor Ma, you know, every 3 years somebody takes a lash at this who get into government. We want durability of the system. Every government that has done this in the last 7 years, there have been good things, there have been not so good things. So we've taken this as a really good opportunity to say, look, this is what's needed. You've asked us for our opinions, here they are. We've also included some examples of, hey, this is what happens in practice. Because we've found, particularly when you're presenting to select committees, they respond really well to those examples that we give. And we know the Waikato is infamous for its complexity of resource management, and they really do listen to what we say. So I will pass over to Katrina, who has a very short slide pack. There is not one slide per page of submission. And just to point out the high points for you. And we have sought that if there are any changes that the recommendation will be signed off by the Chair and myself in response to any amendments. Over to you, Katrina.
Thank you for that introduction, Tracy, and Morena koutou. So I'll just begin with a very brief recap of where this fits within the government's overall resource management reform program, and then we'll move on to a summary of the proposals and the draft submission. So this slide is one you've seen in presentations before, but it is a useful recap of the timeline for resource management reform. As you've heard before, reform is being undertaken in 3 phases, and we're currently in phase 2. This has already included 2 bills to amend the RMA, and we're now in the final part of this phase with consultation on the packages of proposed national direction changes, which is shown with the red circle in the centre of the slide. There is slightly more nuance in the timelines for the different packages than is shown on this slide, which I'll explain shortly. But finally on this slide, you can see that the upcoming 3rd phase of reform will involve the replacement of the RMA, and 2 bills for this are expected to be introduced by the end of the year. It's also important to note that the government does intend for the proposed changes to national direction to be transitioned into the new resource management system once this is established. Next slide, please. So the national direction proposals are grouped into 4 packages as shown on this slide. This item is focused on packages 1 to 3, while package 4 is covered in the next item. As I mentioned, and as Tracy alluded to, there is some difference in the approach between the packages. For packages 1 and 2, this is the only opportunity to provide feedback prior to the new and amended national direction being finalised by the government. Reflective of this, the discussion documents included indicative drafting for the national direction changes, as well as consultation questions. So you'll see the draft submission for packages 1 and 2 comments on this indicative drafting where relevant. Package 3, which relates to freshwater, is following a slightly different timeline. The current consultation is seeking feedback on high-level proposals to amend freshwater national direction. However, this will be followed by a further consultation opportunity on exposure drafts later in the year. Next slide, please.
I'm not familiar with what the slide deck looks like. Tracy, do you have programmed in?
Madam Chair, it's very high level. Perhaps at the end might be the best way to do that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So before I get into any more detail of the packages and what the draft submissions say on them, we wanted to mention the key high-level messages across the draft submissions. The draft submissions, as Tracy said, are comprehensive, which reflects the substantial nature of the national direction packages. The draft submissions agree that there are some areas for improvement in current national direction. However, they highlight that there are other areas where the proposed changes may increase complexity for decision making or result in unintended consequences if provisions aren't clear or well integrated across the instruments. The draft submissions consider the proposed changes from an implementation perspective and recommend amendments to improve clarity, workability and certainty for councils, applicants and communities. Some of the other high-level themes across the draft submissions include ensuring appropriate balance between providing for development and addressing adverse effects, ensuring national direction is sector neutral to achieve equality in its application, making sure responsibilities and costs aren't just shifted around or devolved in the system, adequately providing for iwi and hapu participation and ensuring Te Ture Whaimana is adequately recognised, and making national direction enduring over election cycles. Many of the key points in the draft submissions are in general alignment with those of Te Urukahika and Taituara, while recognising that there are some regional variations in views on details of the freshwater proposal. Next slide, please, Dave. I'll just touch on a high-level summary of the specific packages and responses in the draft submissions. So package 1, relating to infrastructure and development, contains proposals for 4 new national direction instruments and amendments to 4 existing instruments. The new instruments include national policy statements for infrastructure and natural hazards, and new national environmental standards for Granny Flats and Papakainga. Package 1 also includes proposed amendments to the NPSs for renewable electricity generation and electricity networks, and NESs for electricity network activities and telecommunications. So for package 1, the draft submission supports stronger national direction for infrastructure. In relation to the infrastructure and electricity NPSs, recommends specific amendments to refine proposed definitions and better align objectives and policies with the purpose of the RMA. Supports some of the proposed amendments to the NES for electricity network activities, including introduction of permitted activity standards for EV charging, and recommends specific technical amendments. In relation to the new NESs for Granny Flats and Papakainga, supports enabling these activities subject to appropriate conditions, and focuses on ensuring the proposed instruments integrate well with regional plan rules and address natural hazards. And finally, supports the introduction of an NPS for natural hazards and makes a range of recommendations to strengthen this, including expanding the scope of hazards included, better recognising adaptation plans, and better aligning with other climate guidance. Next slide, please. Package 2, relating to the primary sector, involves proposed amendments to 8 existing national direction instruments, which are listed on the slide. The amendments proposed in this package do tend to be more targeted and specific than many of the proposals in package 1. For package 2, the draft submission recommends specific amendments to proposals for the NES for marine aquaculture to address potential environmental and biosecurity risks. Recommends specific amendments to proposals for the NES for commercial forestry, including to enable councils to work with communities in setting appropriate management regimes. In relation to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, recommends amendments to ensure that regional councils' flood management and land drainage infrastructure is included in changes relating to infrastructure within the coastal marine area. Does not support the proposed amendments to the stock exclusion regulations due to the significant risks this would pose to threatened species. In relation to the NPS for highly productive land, if LUC3 land is to be exempt from the NPS as proposed, the submission recommends only removing restrictions for urban development, not lifestyle development, and recommends limiting rezoning of LUC3 land for urban purposes to plan changes initiated by local authorities only, except in specific circumstances. And finally, the submission does not support proposals to align provisions for mining and quarrying across instruments in their entirety due to concerns about environmental impacts. Next slide, please. So moving lastly onto package 3. This package seeks feedback on options to amend the NPS for freshwater management and NES for freshwater. The questions in this discussion document are grouped around key topics, which you'll see listed on the slide. The draft submission on package 3 is generally supportive of many of the proposals, but provides recommendations focused on improving workability and ongoing certainty. Key recommendations within the draft submission include that the NPSFM should focus on a single integrated objective, retaining Te Mana o Te Wai in the hierarchy of obligations within the NPSFM. In relation to the National Objectives Framework, retaining the 4 existing compulsory values and a core set of compulsory attributes, while allowing targeted regional flexibility and responsiveness. And that commercial vegetable production should not be made a permitted activity through national standards for a number of reasons, including potential losses of water quality across the region, impacts on the ability to meet treaty settlement statutory obligations, and potential impacts on other sectors and operators. The draft submission also does not support removing the requirement to map wetlands and makes a range of technical recommendations to improve proposals for water security and storage, wetland provisions, and fish passage regulations. So overall, staff consider the recommendations within the draft submissions are important for ensuring that national direction is clear, workable for implementation, and provides certainty for councils, applicants, and communities. And that brings me to the end of my summary. If you could just go to the final slide, please, Dave. To help with questions, this just identifies where you can find different parts of the submissions within the agenda document. So through you, Madam Chair, we're happy to take any questions.
Well done, Katrina, and well done to the team getting through so much work in the last few weeks. I know that that's not easy, and so just want to commend you for what you've been able to put in front of council today. All right, I've got Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Tracy, and your team for the enormous amount of work that's gone into putting all this together. I'm sorry I had to print it all out, but me. First of all, the first point I'd like to make, and these points I'd like to make in a couple of questions, that you're suggesting that commercial vegetable growing be a permitted activity only, and I'm asking why, because as I understand it, the legislation they're heading towards putting industry in charge of control and regulating their own particular industries. We know with the Vegetable Growers Association, Port New Zealand, they've got New Zealand Good Agricultural Practice, which is a very tough regime, which is an internationally recognised standard. It's audited at maximum every 3 years for each grower, so it's subject to an external consulting and audit process at the present time. And I had a look at the part of GAP. I've been involved in it myself, and there are 8 separate bulletins on environmental compliance standards. I hope that we've been through those, because if that's where we should be targeting, I believe we should be targeting the advice of Port New Zealand. If there's anything in there which is not being picked up, then that's where the adjustments should be, because I believe the industry should be self-regulated. At the end of the day, we shouldn't be the regulator for that. And if, just as an example, vegetable production is efficient vegetable production is highly dependent on the controlled application of nitrogen, which is included in those environmental notes. And if you don't use the correct amount of nitrogen, you're going to have runoff. We accept that, but that is to the detriment of the growers. So if they're going to produce to standards, which they have to do to comply with GAP, then they apply the correct amount of nitrogen, which is then absorbed by the plants. So you should have minimum runoff of nitrogen. So I just want to make sure that our science people have got their head around that, and that they feel comfortable with what's in the NZ GAP, and that there are controls in place for it. The second point I would like to talk to is Te Mana Otiwai. I believe we should be going for option 3. I don't think it's appropriate that it should be incorporated in legislation and policy going forward. And my main reason for the opposition is what it's done in terms of the process for reconsenting of the Waitaki hydro schemes, where $180 million was spent on that. That cost is being now placed on ratepayers, taxpayers and the consumers through increased costs. And that will proliferate throughout New Zealand if it's allowed to continue. And that's why I support option 3, which means we should not have Te Mana Otiwai in the regulations. And I guess one of the, I appreciate the positivity in this document, but personally I would like to see a greater effort made to put constructive comments forward, which is going to see us being, if you like, in support of what the government's trying to achieve rather than opposing it. I know you've tried to put that flavour in here, Tracy, but to me it's not strong enough. And we're sending a message which is being picked up on by certain politicians, as you will have heard. And if we would continue to do that, well, then I suggest that we're signing our own death warrant as a regional council. That's my observations and comments.
Tracy, did you want to respond to any of this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first comment there around commercial vegetable production. So comprehensively appreciate, I guess, the perspective of our commercial vegetable growers in our region and throughout the country.
Can you just bring your microphone there?
Okay. Hear me better now, councillors?
Can you angle it towards you? Angle it. There we go. Get in there.
Good Lord.
Get in there, Tracy.
So yeah, in regard to commercial vegetable production, we've been through the Plan Change 1 process. We've got a decade of knowledge and evidence under our belt, which has been well tested, both sides of the argument well tested through the Environment Court only recently, and we have the decision of the court that's come out that has very much guided our response to the proposals. We've also had a series of one-on-one meetings with Ministry for the Environment officials, and we know that they are under some pretty strong writing instructions to find a solution. We also help them understand the implications of perhaps what they are suggesting that I don't think they fully understood, and we have the benefit of having worked with the commercial vegetable production, its intricacies, its movement around catchments and subcatchments over the last decade to understand. As recently as last week, Brent and I met with commercial vegetable production representatives again, so they could reiterate the importance of their sector. We're not denigrating that at all in the submission. What we are saying in the submission, and it was one of the points that we had on the earlier slide, is every sector needs to be treated equally. The NZ GAP, the work that's done under that, it has proven not to achieve some of the environmental outcomes that we're wanting to achieve for the region. We're also aware that by making commercial vegetable production a permitted activity, and I've mentioned this to councillors previous, somebody else has to pick up the mitigation that commercial vegetable production isn't asked to do. Now that somebody else will be other dairy farmers, sheep and beef farmers, other horticulturalists that aren't commercial vegetable production. Odds on, well, our role as staff is to take a sector neutral perspective, and we are, and the others who may well pick it up will be urban users, because there might be additional mitigation that will need to be made by point source discharges. So from our perspective, where we have to advise and take into consideration everybody along that spectrum, there are ramifications of making commercial vegetable production a permitted activity. It means that somebody else will need to pick up the slack effectively in that catchment. We know that the crop rotation and moving between subcatchments and catchments is a challenge, and to make commercial vegetable production a permitted activity without guardrails to manage that could well mean that it rotates into a subcatchment that it's not previously been in, and suddenly starts changing a whole lot of information there. So from our perspective, it's really important that we take a sector neutral role. We believe that the commercial vegetable production signals that are coming through need further testing, and thankfully there'll be a second round through the freshwater conversation. We also have Te Ture Whaimana that exists in the Waipa Waikato catchment, and we also have Variation 5 down in the Lake Taupo catchment, and they both require mitigation, and it's come through from the court, it's come through. We know that particularly with Te Ture Whaimana, it prevails over any national policy standard. So a lot of our submission in regard to commercial vegetable production is helping officials who are drafting this for Cabinet consideration to fully understand the impacts, because those impacts will be shepherded home to this table and to this council to resource and mitigate of any legacy, not just from commercial vegetable production, but from other things. So I do want to give councillors confidence that we are relying on the science, on the evidence that's been put before the Environment Court, not just in regard to one particular area, but looking across that and looking across the entire region as well. We know the Environment Court was focused just on Waikato Waipa, but we've also looked at what the implications are elsewhere in the region. In respect to Te Mana o Te Wai, and thank you very much, Katrina, for this cheat sheet to finding the pages, because, yeah, crikey. Look, Te Mana o Te Wai, a lot of people do have an allergic reaction purely to the name, Te Mana o Te Wai, but what Te Mana o Te Wai is talking about is putting the water first, putting the river first. No, if it is not, we are not allocating to the river or allocating to our water bodies first, everything else will be in detriment. So from our perspective, that is critically important. It is what our regional plan very much talks about without actually establishing a hierarchy, but we allocate to our water bodies first, then our critical uses for people and for stock, and then for others who want to make use of that water. Should that be all three lined up the same? I would think we've just highly complexised, that's a new word, our entire consenting process. To try and say all three are equal, please decide, is a real challenge. So I appreciate there are different perspectives, but from our perspective, both from a science perspective, a policy making perspective, and implementation, as the hierarchy of putting the water bodies first to maintain those water bodies so they can support humans, animals, and anything else, it's very important we keep that. What was the third one? I wrote down professional. So in respect to, we have attempted to be as constructive as we possibly can while still giving our professional advice to council in terms of what we would recommend based on our experience and our knowledge. We're not going to agree with everything, but we didn't disagree with everything either. As I said, each 3 years we get this buffet of grand ideas, and some of them are wonderful and some of them will create headaches for us. So we have tried, and we have the responsibility of sustainably managing our environment, and that needs to come through. But we have, taken the direction from council and done that within the acknowledgement of communities and economy as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. I've got Councillor Smith, Mark, Clarkson, and then Hughes again. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Not sure where to begin with that, but I'll start with the Waiora Committee, because in freshwater, the slide that you put up in relation to freshwater, punch 3 of that, you talk about September. I'm just wanting to understand a bit there, because look, within the Waiora Committee, we came to a consensus that with the government's announcement of their freshwater announcements, etc., the RMA changes, that we needed to part things. And I'm using my words here, not words that were talked about on the day, because we can't progress until we understand where the legislation's going. And the understanding was that they would be out, and the committees about mid-early September coming back together to have a look at what those are. And look, the talking around the table was no decisions are probably likely to be made for a couple of years in the Waiora Committee about substantial matters until it all gets packaged up. So I'm just wanting to understand, Tracy, if the announcements in relation to freshwater are not being made until that sometime in September, there's no definite date there, what we may have to look at changing the date for that Waiora Committee, because what's the point of meeting now unless there is information that we can work with or understand? Secondly, what concerns me is New Zealand is a food producing nation, and be it dairy farmers, be it sheep farmers, be it beef farmers, be it commercial vegetable growing, we need food that's affordable, healthy for our community and for the world, because we export to the world. So the cost of production needs to be reasonable. And I am not going to say anything that suggests that I want to compromise the environment. Long before it was fashionable, I fenced my waterways 40 years ago. So, some people have done the right thing already, and I stopped using fertiliser and the likes. And just for the record, I actually produce a hell of a lot more off the land without fertiliser than I do. But that's because when it floods, I get everybody else's fertiliser washing down for free. So, and thank you for those who stopped the flood last week. So really come back to the point, I don't want to see food production per se compromised that it becomes too expensive for the community to actually purchase without compromising the environment. So that's where I want to see the balance. And that's why I'm not isolating commercial vegetable production on its own. But last week, Robbie and I, or a couple of weeks ago, we were on a property in relation to replacement of a flood pump. We saw cropping within a metre of the drain, or drain, and within that, from a distance, I thought there were hundreds, possibly thousands of carrots in the board drain. In fact, it was maize cobs, and it had come from the harvester during the harvesting, because that was mid-June. So it must be 3 or 4 weeks ago. Mid-June, and they were cropping maize. Unbelievable at this time of the year to be cropping maize. I still hammer on that, as an aside from this, we need to get on with those bylaws, because the bylaws will do a hell of a lot more locally. And in tandem, we need to fight this on more fronts than just these submissions, because these are going to take time. So I do wonder, there's a whole lot of issues mixed around here. And sadly, when I went through this, without getting into detail right now, I wrote a big fat no next to the resolution, because there are parts of it that I think we're not right with. On balance, there's some good points, but there's things that I can't support. So I'm not sure, and I maybe need to get that thing out, sitting on the fence again, Noel. But the reality is, I can accept some things, but we've been asked to blanketly approve one huge document, and therefore I have trouble with that. So it's massive. What are this? Over 100 pages. So I'll leave it there, but I just would like some comment, whether it's about the Waiora timing, that maybe now we're offline because it's not this particular subject, but it's relating to this. And I've got another point which I'll make in the next topic. So thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can respond to that, Dave, could you go back to the slide that had the timeline on it? So
It's near the start. There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Come back.
So this timeline here, of course, doesn't account for the ministerial announcement last week around the pause on plan making, which is part of the conversation that was had at the Waikato Committee last week. I sent the email
2 days
out
ago.
to councillors. Gosh, okay, it felt like last week. So we had a ministerial announcement, and as I've advised before, a ministerial announcement does not statute make. However, we do know that there will be the statute that gives effect to that coming in mid-August. So that's what we're hoping for. We are playing, we are keeping up with these things as they come out of Wellington. Some we know about, some we don't know about. Some are coming out with sufficient time, some are not. It is all part of the parcel. What the announcement did last week was really just and it's an announcement that we've been seeking from ministry officials for some time to get some clarity. Now, we'd already, as I said in my email, I sent last week, we had adjusted down our policy program in anticipation of this. Now, that's a policy program. That is not related to national environmental standards, as Katrina said. There are a bunch of new ones of those and amendments to national environment standards. They don't go through a policy program. They get gazetted and we must implement. So it's really important to know that our policy program is only part of our response to these 27 odd instruments that are being changed. I do appreciate, councillors, that there is an incredible amount of material there to get through. The alternative is not worth thinking about, not submitting, not providing guidance, not having a seat at the table. There is a way we could have perhaps summarised, but a lot of the detail would be lost. So I apologise for the size of it, but I believe the government has done us a favour putting everything out at once rather than drip feeding. I think one we can see is as much integration as possible. So in terms of do we wait, do we pause everything until we've got absolute certainty? The fact sheet that we sent, made available at Waikato Committee from the Ministry for the Environment said it pauses the notification of plans. It does not pause the work to notify those plans. And that fact sheet, I was surprised it said that, but that's what it says. So I think, and that's the report that I signalled will bring to August or September council meeting that says, here's our entire policy program, not just freshwater, our other things, and what we're doing and what we're stopping and what we're carrying on, the conversations we're carrying on having. I do want to just mention, to respond to the food affordability. The policies that we implement are part of the contributor to whatever food production or any activity occurs. That is life for any activity. I think we are incredibly respectful in our submissions and acknowledging the legacy of who and what the Waikato is and why some of these competing national directions actually put us in a hell of a pickle when you're trying to go for growth, but at the same time, the government wants us to protect highly productive land, but provide more opportunities for growth, more water, but at the same time protect water for other things. I mean, regional governance is where a lot of these complex matters hit the road. So, but we can't be belligerent and not ensure, as you see, Councillor Smith, that, you know, the environment isn't compromised. And we do have to deliver some messages that some folk don't want to hear. And I think the way we've tried to deliver them is in a balanced way. I hear what you're saying, but there's also a fine line between staff giving you professional advice and bumping into advocacy, and that's yeah.
Madam Chair, can we just go to the next slide? I think it is where I was. Yes, so that initial consultation. So that you talk about later this year. So I took from your presentation that this freshwater stuff isn't really coming out until September, and therefore conflicts with the. I'm sorry to harp on about, but there are expectations from the 10 committee members that were present, and Bruce will hopefully come into that space back. So that we were going to see something in August that's meaningful in this, so that we could have a think and talk about what the implications are at that subsequent meeting. And I'm sorry to hijack it, but we really need clarity, please.
Yep. Madam Chair, there's a couple of things there around August, September. So we're hoping to have the legislation through on the pause or non-pause of the pausing of the plans. That legislation will get in August, hopefully. September is, well, exposure drafts later this year. Sorry, going back, we only have just managed to have one meeting of the Waikato Committee.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That is the very start of the conversation on freshwater. So not having the certainty of direction, I don't think inhibits the committee meeting again. The certainty of direction we will have probably over the next 12 to 18 months, but we know it's important to keep up with what some of those changes are. I would also just make the comment that our State of the Environment report tells us we've got issues to fix, irrespective of what the statute is. We've got issues to fix, so we need to start having those conversations, and also issues to celebrate, as I think Councillor Kneebone raised at the Waikato Committee. You know, that old chestnut of what about the people who there are an incredible amount out there who have done the right job. What are we going to do with them, and how do we have those conversations? The other challenge with September, as you're only too aware, is Council on the 25th of September ceases as a council, and as I was talking with Councillor Maher, a couple of governments prior have put out things for submissions when we don't have councils, which is not helpful to staff. It really isn't. So what we will be doing at that September meeting is just bringing a paper to council saying if something comes through, such as further consultation on an exposure draft, what are your guardrails? Here's what we've submitted before. Council and council staff are not suddenly going to have a contrary point of view to what hasn't already been put in front of council and endorsed. There's not going to be anything that bubble up. That's really important to us. The other thing, and this happened, I'm going to say 3 years ago, when the new RM bills came out, the National and Built Environment Bill and the Spatial Planning Act, they came out the week before Christmas with a new council who really didn't know which way was up in terms of the RMA, some of those councillors. So all I can say to you is we'll keep abreast, we'll feed in where we can. I don't think it is, certainty is not contingent upon the next Waikato Committee meeting. Sorry, that was a long explanation.
Okay, so I want councillors to be really clear on what you're looking for here, because first of all, I just want to test. Councillors do want to make a submission on all of this, yes? Okay. So we need to arrive at a direction. So what I want councillors to focus on is if there are things in here where you're vehemently opposed to the position that has been presented here, offer your rationale and let's see if there is support for that. Because we can remove aspects of this, we can change aspects of this. That's council's right in this position. So I just want us to make sure that we are all focused on, we do need to arrive at a clear direction for staff so we can finalize these submissions so that Waikato Region has its input, provides its input as this legislation is being developed. Yeah, hoping.
Madam Chair, if I can perhaps also suggest we could place additional narrative in the covering letter that recognises the quantum of this, that recognises the challenge for elected members to look at every single point that is raised by government wanting feedback and our response. So we can couch some narrative. Again, that's something that we can craft and have it endorsed by yourself as representative of the conversation that we're having at the moment. That there's
I think it's really important to do that, actually. I think it's really important for this council to highlight the challenge that gets placed before councillors to be across every aspect of this. All right, who have I got? I've got Councillor Marr, then Councillor Clarkson, then Councillor Hughes again, then Councillor Kneebone. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're probably following on from that, Tracy, looking for confidence in the staff's assessment of significance and relating that back to Local Government Act, Part 6. You know, it's our duty to make our decisions, and part of that is based on those that may be affected or have an interest in. So, you know, there's a huge amount of people affected by what we've got in front of us here today. So, I just think that perhaps that level of assessment of significance, may need another look at. A couple of points that I just want clarity on. So, with the NES on marine aquaculture. We want to introduce fallow periods. Can someone explain to me what fallow periods are and why we would want to possibly stop farmers doing something while they wait for reconsenting?
Madam Chair, this is where I'll throw to the gallery to hopefully an expert. Looks like Kristen.
Not a curly.
Hi, my name is Christine Etchinson. I'm the Principal Consents Advisor in the regulatory team. And I'm dealing with aquaculture mainly. May I ask to repeat your question, was that regarding fallow periods?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah,
sure.
in the aquaculture, marine aquaculture space, yeah.
Yeah, so that national direction actually proposes changes to allow for trials and research. And basically they're saying there are different, let's say, proposals for different trials and research, like you do a small structure with certain species for a certain period, and there are different activity statuses and different proposals. And what they're basically saying is it makes it much easier to do trial and research to help the industry to do trial and research, develop things, be innovative. And the fallow period, I think it's important because if so you do the trial and research, but you could then renew your consent and continue. You get let's say a 3-year consent, and that might be a controlled activity, so we must grant it. So at the end of the period, they could continue to apply for another 3-year consent, apply for another 3-year consent, another 3-year consent. So all of a sudden you have a 30-year consent essentially, and every time at the end of the period you must grant it if it's a controlled activity. So basically the fallow period, they propose to say you can do trial and research for that period, for that easier consent process, let's say, where we must grant that consent, but that is only for that period. And then you can still do trial and research at other locations, maybe for a different time. But I guess that's to prevent people misusing the easier consenting pathway for actual commercial aquaculture.
Christine, just to clarify, a fallow period is a rest period between events?
Yes.
And is there a time that they're proposing that we're supporting?
Yes, so it differs between for different activities. So sometimes, it's 6 months, I think they're proposing from memory. But some rules have it clearer set out. Other rules say you cannot consent under the NESMA and other. Yeah, so it's not quite clear and consistent through the proposal. So one submission point is to make it consistent amongst the different provisions, and the other one is that we support that fallow period, the 6 months.
So you're worried about cumulative effects potentially?
Yeah, I think it's more about the government wants to provide easier consenting pathways for trial and research. So if you don't include the fallow period, you would basically provide an easier consenting pathway for not just for trial and research, but for continuous marine farming. And there could be, I would assume that one of the thinking is doing some aquaculture in a particular area where usually aquaculture wouldn't have such an easy consent pathway is acceptable for 3 years because it's temporary and you remove it and I don't know, the environment may, revert back to what it was. But if you continue to use that environment over a longer period than, for example, the 3 years, there might be different effects.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I can just add, I think it is that continuous use, a default continuous use that hasn't had to go through a consent process, as well as if there is a cumulative impact of those types of activities, that's going to have significant effects cumulatively for a number of permitted activities in a particular space. When others have gone through a consenting process that has been assessed and might have specific conditions applied.
Okay, I'll leave it there. With the infrastructure, I've just got a question around functional need and operational need.
Sorry, if councillors could direct us to the page they're on, that would be really helpful.
246. And it's just that you've got a statement there. We consider there is a risk of enabling all infrastructure with functional and operational needs may result in activities with operational needs preventing significant infrastructure that has functional and locational constraints from establishing in particular areas. Now, I know I'm a poor electrician, but I do understand functional need and operational need. I just don't understand that statement. Perhaps an example would help get my head around it.
Yeah. We have a mobile mic for the flotilla back there. That's fantastic.
And I know we have 17 policy experts and science and policy, so interested.
Tēnā koutou, kia ora, hey, it works. Yes, it's a very interesting question, this whole functional need. You can only undertake this activity in this particular environment or place. Operational means you've got to have a good reason to be there. It can be locational, it could be things such as cost and timing. This is something that we have looked at. I'm looking at it in terms of the coastal marine area, but there are certain sensitive environments and places. If you have a constrained space where you have a certain functional need that should go there and it's appropriate to go there, you don't want an activity that has an operational need. It could go other places to go in that place. We have certain areas certain other councils have raised this in terms of ports, Auckland and Tasman, in conversations with them. For us, we have development areas in the coastal plan for TCDC activities, and there are other zoned areas of coastal space where activities with a functional need to go there, and operational activities would mess up that functional need.
Is it a matter of clarifying that sentence? Because I think what we are kind of directing here is almost the hierarchy of need, where those with functional needs should trump operational.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking in respect of regionally significant infrastructure, might actually need to be located there, but some are for serving, say, the public, whereas opposed a commercial venture might negate that area for the location of public infrastructure.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just that clarity around that statement.
Yep.
is important. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, as it happens, I believe I'm next on the list. So I will take my opportunity to say what I was going to say when I was sitting over there. And in fact, I'm just about to move back over there, and I will do it over there.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to do in addressing the material that we've been given is just a little reminder of the High Court ruling that came out on the 4th of July 2025, which clearly spelled out that decisions must be made based on the law as it currently stands, not on potential future legislative changes. This is pertinent, Noel, particularly to the discussion around what Wairua can or can't do. Yeah, so it's really important that people read this decision, actually, because it came out on the 4th of July. It's comprehensive, and it really restates the issue about not marching ahead and speculating and making decisions on the basis of something that actually hasn't happened yet and may not actually happen in some cases. So I just wanted that reminder. And the second thing I wanted to do is return to, I would really like it, Councillor Hughes, if you would stop framing these issues in relation to, I think the words you used were fantastic hyperbole, threatening our own survival because we're not listening to the central government. Well, this is a submission process, and it is our role to tell them what we need to tell them. And I just want to say that I found this whole submission compelling, and I thought it actually hit the right mark. And I'm saying that because it must continue to clearly understand the impacts or environmental costs of any activity which is a development or an enhancement of productivity. We've still got to keep focused on that. And while I totally support you, Chris, on the basis of, yes, the submission must be polite, and yes, the submission must have the appropriate tone, but the submission must tell the truth based on the evidence, and it's the evidence of our technical and policy experts in the council. I think we've got to be sometimes a bit careful ourselves as governors that we don't start telling people that that is not acceptable, when in fact the evidence from the technical and policy advisor has been spelled out in the submission, and I believe it has in a number of areas here where it's really important. And one example I would refer to in particular is the wetland example, because you have to say no and you've got to tell them why. You've got to be honest and tell the truth on the real environmental cost of what these proposals might do. So I really would like us to get away from that constant looking to, oh, well, you know, we're going to get offside with. No, it's not about getting offside with central government. It's about providing them with the best possible technical and policy advice as they rework and review these pieces of legislation. So I wanted to, I guess, yeah, just say that of the, and I actually did read the whole document, Noel. It took me a long time, but I did it. And I accept that it's big and it's complex, but again, I think there does need to be a degree of trust in our technical and policy advisors, because we are governors, we're not technical policy advice experts, and this is the production of a new policy, a new piece of legislation. So we need to be, I think they've hit it really well in most areas. I can't actually point to a particular place where I would say, I think you need to rewrite that. I actually think they got the tone right. And I also think, No, I didn't. I'm not saying that, but I did hear some people, I did hear you say that it's a huge document. I just wanted to clarify that, well, it absolutely is huge, but unfortunately we have to read it. So anyway, so look, I want to give kudos to the staff that have, this is an enormous piece of work. It's to understand the nuance of all of those pieces of legislation and the implications of what those changes might be is not a small job. It's a huge job, and I believe it's been done well. And I think if we're going to give feedback, we need to, as the Chair has just suggested, we need to be very specific about what is it that you're saying that's wrong with this document. And I can't see anything in it that I would change. Actually, on the case of wetlands, I think you've been a bit too soft, to be honest. And the reason I'm saying that, to use that as my example, the issue of wetlands grazing, you've put quite a lot of emphasis on the impact of threatened species, but the impact is way wider than just threatened species. The impact is on all services provided by those wetlands that are potentially now going to be grazed by deer or whatever it might be. The impacts including the degradation of the wetland system, the implications for carbon sequestration. It's not just threatened species, and the implications for effective buffering of flooding, you know, when a wetland's being used to provide that service. So I'd just encourage you actually to look at the wetland section and perhaps just give it a bit more than threatened species. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And these submissions do offer us as a region a great opportunity to not only help provide some insight, but also to highlight where the Waikato region might be specifically impacted, or there might be a consideration that we are aware of in this region that that Parliament and Wellington may not be. So I think that, just wanted to say that. Sorry, did you want to say?
So, Bruce, I take your point, and I absolutely was surprised to see that wetland because, you know, like those of us who are responsible have fenced them off. So, absolutely, but the issue is it's left and right here, and or one way and the other. I think it's too light here and too much here. On balance, I think one has to support it, but I'd like to make it noted that there is a degree, you know, on a scale of support rather than no support or whatever. So, yeah, it's a great bit of work. Take nothing away from that. It's just something you're light on something and heavy on other. So, yeah, I'll leave it. Thank you. But yeah, I agree with you on.
For council to make our way forward, though, on this matter, I do need councillors. If there is a specific piece, like Councillor Clarkson has just highlighted, if there's a specific piece in here that a councillor has issue with. Councillor Hughes, you raised something as well. That's the kind of direction our staff need to further refine this submission, as opposed to there's a continuum of council support for the entirety. I'm not sure that that's going to get us.
Can I just go back to that, Madam
Sure.
Chair? Like commercial vehicle, vegetable production. My issue is about the balance between productivity and cost. That's the point. And secondly, like the wetlands, I'm happy to support. It would have been a little bit tougher there, but you know.
Great, good direction.
Madam Chair, I think that the matter that Councillor Smith's raised is very pertinent, that there will not be 100% agreement or disagreement with every single comment in there. I think that is some narrative, as I said, that we can put at in the covering letter that actually acknowledges that there is that continuum on the 1,000 odd submission points. There is a continuum of 14 councillors on any of those points.
Yeah, yes. Okay, I've got Councillor Hughes, Councillor Nepo, and Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems that we've moved from playing the ball to playing the man, so I'll have a go as well.
No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to play the man. We are going to play the ball. We are talking about this submission that Waikato Regional Council is putting forward. We've got a plethora of pages in front of us. I expect councillors to point staff to any specific points where you have an issue.
Thank you, Madam
Councillor
Chair.
Hughes.
Am I allowed to play the man or not? I'd like to go back to the point I made earlier in terms of regulation. Who should be responsible regulator for these issues? I'm all for getting rid of layers of bureaucracy, red tape, out of all organisations that are involved in this. To me, industry is best placed to regulate their members. We've got a perfectly good system in place for New Zealand GAP. If it needs strengthening, I suggest that we should be working with Horticulture New Zealand to help strengthen their regulation and then pass the responsibility across to them. And I don't see any of that in here. And that's what frustrates me, Madam Chair, because all we're doing is layering it in another level of red tape by putting ourselves in the system when it shouldn't be required. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I understand what Councillor Hughes is saying, because we have many industry accords and good practice guides that go across. Some are effective, some are not. The evidence is telling us that they, on a whole, are not effective in addressing some of the issues we've got. The one thing I'd also take us back to is a comment that was made in a previous slide around we're not just moving things around and evolving elsewhere, because as Brent will always remind us, a permitted activity doesn't mean that there is no support or intervention. So while it might look like a permitted activity is a good idea, it may in fact mean that we have to resource the monitoring and enforcement of that to ensure compliance with third-party agreements as they're known, such as the NZ GAP. We have to put more resources into that. It's just important that whatever the structure is that comes up, it's workable, it's implementable, and we can understand. But we can incorporate a comment to take account of Councillor Hughes's reference to those industry guidelines. At the moment, they don't cut the mustard, some of them. Some far exceed what some of the rules are provided. So we can include a comment to acknowledge that. And if the government decides to go down those routes, what we would be looking for in those industry documents.
Madam Chair, I hope Tracy just didn't say it, because I was just having a quick talk with Brent. But I think where some of your interests are is probably in a different process again, where the government's going to be gazetting some things that will enable some industry, especially in those environment plan and accreditation of industry to move forward. There's another process that sits outside of all of this, which is probably difficult to see.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. C, I would like to see the two, I'm trying to suggest they be meshed together rather than having two separate systems.
Thank you. All right, I've got Councillor Kneebone.
Very briefly, I support the submission, acknowledging it's pretty complicated and there's a couple of little things there that if I had all day, I'd argue about, and I'm not going to. Just want to make a comment in terms of your concerns with veggie growing, Chris. I get that. I've been observing that process all the way through of PC1, understand their issues. I just want to reiterate or explain that when I was in my early days in this council was when all those forest to farm conversions took off and they pumped another 40,000 plus cows into the catchment. I vividly remember Rick Pridmore from Dairy NZ ripping strips off me. Why did your council let that happen? Because it forced every other existing dairy farm in the catchment to take a haircut to enable them to come in. I'm really staunch on all these industries have to be treated the same. And if we're going to give veggie growing the ability to self-manage, we've got to do it for the dairy sector as well. And the dairy sector have made it clear they don't want to do it. They want us to do it. They want to work with us and do it properly. And it's the same for all the other big sectors as well. I just think we're on a hiding to nothing if we go down that track. But I agree with what the broader concept that Chris was just talking about we've got to do this in a more effective and less bureaucratic way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
I would go to page 337, which is the vegetable growers. I think we've been too oppositional to the proposal there for the permitted activity status. We oppose it in principle and we strongly recommend it should not apply to the Waikato. However, further on, we get to page 341, we recommend if no national direction is pursued, it should focus on supporting domestic supply of fresh vegetables. So we need to understand, it's the point Noel raised earlier, the decisions we make here push up the price of food for everyone. Domestic vegetables this is one of the significant growing areas for New Zealand. We seem to be supportive of domestic supply of vegetables. That's something we should bring further up rather than the initial negative. We also, it's the point Tracy just made earlier, that permitted activity actually has requirements around it. It's not a carte blanche. That's mentioned over the page, that the cost of implementing the required mitigations to remain within permitted activity rules may still be substantial. So there's still costs being imposed within permitted activity. And this recommendation here on 341, if CPA is to be made a permitted activity, we recommend having provisions for the recovery of costs. There is a much more structured and positive way of approaching this than the first statement we start with on page 337. We oppose this and recommend it shouldn't happen, and strongly recommend it shouldn't happen here. So I think that particular part should be reworded to mention some of the other issues we've got where there are other options. And that, as the point that Tracy made with Chris, there are industry agreements that can be, there are other mechanisms than simply opposing. I've been reading through the document, unfortunately, like Noel, the whole thing. This was one of the strongest oppositions we had to almost everything. And I think it's too strong in its current form. Second point I've got relates to, we've talked here on 226 about freshwater and rebalancing the national policy statement into a single integrated objective. And then we list 4 different potentials for that. In page 226, we list them 1, 2, 3, and 4. When we come to our documentation on page 326, we actually have them bullet pointed. So my question is, are we saying that safeguarding life sorting, we're talking here about an alternative approach to multiple potentially competing objectives. We recommend we focus on a single integrated objective that includes those 4. Are we proposing that they have a hierarchy or that they are simply 4 bullet points that are all equal. That's page 326.
Sorry, I'm just jumping here. So there's a single objective, and Katrina's looking behind me, hopefully, if Naomi has anything to say here. What we have tried to suggest is if we end up with the alternative approach of doing away with Te Mana o Te Wai, then we have the integrating objective that I think I actually would suggest that it's a combination of both. It's recognising that the safeguarding of the life supporting capacity of freshwater is the most important thing, and then those others come. Have I got that right, Naomi, or completely wrong?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So while you talk about an integrated single objective, you then have a hierarchy within it.
Yes. Rather than separate competing objectives for each of those 4 things. And we've said it aligns with Te Mana o Te Wai, so we're not stepping completely away from what we've always supported with the Te Mana o Te Wai approach.
Yeah, well, I personally don't agree with keeping Te Mana o Te Wai in. So that's page 328.
Yep.
We support the retention of Te Mana o Te Wai and its hierarchy of obligations. So I would like to have a vote on whether we keep Te Mana o Te Wai in, whether we support that or not.
Just to be clear, Madam Chair, it would be staff's recommendation as in the submission.
Yep.
For a number of reasons, but we would indicate in the submission if council had a contrary view.
And I would suggest that the single integrated approach shouldn't have 1, 2, and 3, and 4. If we're not going to keep Te Mana o Te Wai, then we shouldn't have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what you've got on page 226. I'm just saying that yeah, it's an alternative. That there is a single integrated objective that it requires those 4 things to be balanced when decisions are being made, rather than have a hierarchy of obligations about how you must balance them. So my proposal would be that rebalancing Te Mana o Te Wai, the government's given us 3 options. One of the options is not to have it there. I would propose that's my view, and that
sorry, Ben, what page are we on?
328.
328.
So crikey, one time I haven't got it with me. As the councillors have said, there are options in the discussion document around Te Mana o Te Wai, and they've asked for comments on that, and Katrina has it right here. In terms of whether we remove the hierarchy of obligations, we reinstate the Te Mana o Te Wai provisions from 2017, or we remove the provisions altogether.
Can you say that just what you said before, Tracy?
Sure.
It's just
so there are 3 options in the discussion document with respect to the Mana o Te Wai, how it is presently phrased in the 2020 MPS, to remove the hierarchy of obligations and clarify how Te Mana o Te Wai applies, to reinstate the Te Mana o Te Wai provisions from the 2017 MPS, or to remove the Te Mana o Te Wai provisions. Remove the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai.
Yeah. Which of those 3 are we advocating? Because it's hard to understand.
That's what I was just going to clarify. So this recommendation from staff in the draft submission is not actually exactly any of those 3. It is an amended, modified version of option 1, which is explained in that particular question, which I will just find the page reference for.
So we're actually taking option 1 and souping it up. We're actually increasing we aren't actually answering the government's 3 questions. We're providing a 4th option, which is super plus of 1.
I wouldn't say it's super plus, it's providing an option that we think is far more implementable.
Can you explain how and why?
I think the submission goes into that in quite significant detail in terms of, from a policy perspective, from an implementation perspective, just getting that singular direction in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Oh, somebody's coming to the table.
If I may answer. I'm Tina Warnock, Principal RMA Advisor in the consent section. So our suggestion as relates to consenting decisions is to, you may recall that at the end of last year, the RMA Bill 1 went through, and as part of that, that removed the ability to consider the hierarchy of obligations within Te Mana o Te Wai to the consent process while retaining Te Mana o Te Wai itself for wider planning purposes. And so our suggestion is to retain Te Mana o Te Wai, but keep what was seen as the fix last year and clarify that much more clearly within the document that the hierarchy itself wouldn't be considered in consenting. And that's because there had been a perception that the hierarchy created a situation in consenting, which we didn't view it this way at Waikato, but a perception in some parts of the country where pristine water had to be created before other uses could be considered, which isn't workable. That's not how we use the hierarchy. It's not how it influenced our decisions here, but yeah, the suggestion is retain Te Mana o Te Wai, but make it really clear that the hierarchy is not considered in consenting itself in these processes.
But it is considered in freshwater management policy.
That's right, putting the quality, the health of water first in overall plan.
So that's what I don't think we should be doing. I think we should have that single one where those are the 4 options available, but there's not a hierarchy of them.
I understand what you're saying, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, just from the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years with all the sectors in the community. The feedback is the life supporting capacity of water should be front and centre. How that then travels through the rest of the policy is the gold of the conversation around how we take account of the economy and communities as part of that. But nobody's argued that we shouldn't have safeguarding the life supporting capacity of water at the core. We get that, but that doesn't mean, as Tina said, total exclusion to every other activity. So,
but there is a hierarchy of 1, 2, 3, 4,
yes,
which means that you have to, and economic and social is at the bottom. I don't agree with. I think we need to think about the economics of vegetable production and it needs to be balanced. So I'm not supportive of what you've got here.
Ange.
Hello, Tracy. Well done as usual. Page 271, Tracy. I just want to clarify on a couple of words there, because they sound ominous. So we strongly support the proposed NES permitting papakanga on the specific land types. Now, under the Tūru Whenua Act, there is no specific land types. I just need to understand what that means, that word means. And then down the bottom, you have national significance of Māori living on ancestral lands. There's a contradiction between the second line of the first sentence, supporting infrastructure and recognition of tangata whenua relationships with land and taonga. Then you got somewhere down here where it says whether the land is ancestral or not. So I just want to understand what that whole sentence means, because I do understand what it's trying to do. I know that with myself and other TAs, we've been debating around what papakainga means. And the problem with mainstream and Māori papakainga, they presume to think it's only ancestral lands around marae. That's not quite right anymore. So I just want to understand what that means, specific land types, more than anything.
Through you, Madam Chair, I haven't got the specified land types at my fingertips, but they are specified in the NES in the proposal, so they are specific land types. And from memory, it's not just the ancestral lands around marae, it is around Māori land as defined in the Māori Land Act, Te Ture Whenua Māori Land Act. And the second matter, sorry, I just couldn't find the page reference. All on the same page. Sort of got this aligns with, so it aligns with our regional policy statement where we've already enabled papakainga, and many of our district plans within the region have already progressed the plan changes for that. But we affirm, I guess, what you were saying in terms of Māori living on ancestral land, also including general title in both urban and rural areas. So it's not just limited to the traditional papakainga around marae, it's limited to those areas that are identified as multi-owned Māori land or Māori freehold land. That's how I understand it. Yep.
I can add to that if it would be useful. I've just found the relevant section in the discussion document. So specified land types is just the wording that we've used to refer to the land types listed in the discussion document. It's not actually a defined term, but the discussion document states that the permitted activity status would apply on categories including but not limited to Māori freehold land, Māori customary land, Māori reservations and reserves, former land that was compulsorily converted under the Māori Affairs Amendment Act, and returned land taken for public works. So it was quite a broad list of different land types.
All right. Got Councillor Nebo and Councillor Nicol.
It's just a quick one. Just reminder to everyone that sort of the bulk of the veggie grounds in the Waikato Waipai catchment, we've got Te Mana o Te Awa in the form of Te Ture Whaimana. So trying to unstitch Te Mana o Te Wai is kind of not going to achieve a lot.
I am going to come back to your point, Ben, before we proceed. Jennifer.
Thanks. It was about an hour ago that we said that we weren't all going to agree on every one of the 100 and something points. So I want to thank Trina particularly, I've heard. But just for everybody put the submission together, we certainly need to have a position forward to supporting a motion, which is probably the second part, which is for Pamela to still work with yourself, Tracy, to stitch it together. But I'm just kind of keen to move it and then finish what needs finishing. But I don't think anybody has picked one thing and then done all the work to figure out that they might have like more than 8 votes to kind of change that one thing. Maybe have, but I'm really keen to move it on because it's a really good submission, and I trust that the flotilla of staff spent lots of time thinking about it. And I'm not certain that one of us, well, maybe one of us, but that a whole bunch of us know better than on all of this in a time frame that we can work today, considering it is a submission, and we know how much submissions get attention at the moment. But hopefully they do pick up some really good technical fixes, because whatever is not implementable is not worth the policy.
Okay, I just want to come back to your point, Ben. So if I understand, we're focusing in on page 329, and we're focusing in on that first bullet point in that first box, right? That's the bit you want to test? Retain Te Mana o Te Wai within the MPSFM as at present and the hierarchy of obligations as the MPSM. Oh, sorry, 329 is what? The 329 bullet point 1 in that box is that the bit you want to test? Oh, 327. So you, gosh, I'm not sure how to make some progress on this.
Madam Chair, what I was going to take us back to assist Councillor Dunbar-Smith was the discussion document, because that question specifically refers to objectives, whereas I think Councillor Dunbar-Smith's matter is more fundamental and philosophical than that. So the discussion document has the three. Found it. Well done, Tracy. The three options we're seeking feedback on: 1, remove the hierarchy of obligations; 2, reinstate Te Mana o Te Wai from 2017; or option 1 is to remove the hierarchy of obligations and clarify how Te Mana o Te Wai applies; option 2, reinstate Te Mana o Te Wai from 2017; or option 3, remove Te Mana o Te Wai provisions. As I heard, Councillor Dunbar-Smith would like this council to support option 3, not what the submission outlines, and that's what you'd like to seek a vote on. So
haven't advocated any of those options.
And nor does nor do the questions posed. Let me just have a look. Nor do the questions posed say, do you want 1, 2 or 3? The questions posed say, what will a change in the MPS objectives mean for your region and regional plan process? Do you think that Te Mana o Te Wai should sit within the MPS objectives, separate from the MPS objectives, or outside them altogether, and why? And how will the proposed rebalancing of Te Mana o Te Wai affect the variability with which it has been interpreted to date? Will it ensure consistent implementation? So the questions themselves don't say, do you want 1, 2 or 3? They say help.
That's right, but normally you answer, we want option 1, 2 or 3 when the government asks you a question.
No, because
they've not asked that. That's what you're saying, Tracy, right?
The questions they have it, but they.
So as I said, the MFA officials have said, please don't be constrained by the questions. We want all the feedback that you can give us. They actually said we haven't gone out and done a straw poll. We haven't asked for a straw poll on Te Mana o Te Wai, and you provide it because it's not binary. It's not a yes or no by virtue of the argument we're having right here now. It's complicated. That's all I can offer. We took on board that and said, look, this is what we think would work best. Tina's given a really good explanation about how, if it's taken to the nth degree from a consenting process, it could be not ideal. From a policy process, it's important to set up the policy process from a hierarchy perspective. That's what staff believe.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the hierarchy has gone from consenting processes.
Correct.
I would like to see it go from the policy process.
So that's part of your resolution as well.
We're just doing a straw poll. The only resolution here is going to be
so that is not
on this package of submission.
Yeah, I'm just trying to help. So the first recommendation you might like to put is whether council supports option 1, 2 or 3, and then wherever that lands. You might also then say, as part of that,
You put option 1, 2, or 3 up on the board.
I
Madam
think
Chair,
we are getting lost in the weeds on this a bit. And I'm just wondering if, because I don't think that we have the time today to ensure that every single councillor understands fully the implications of taking such a specific position on this. And I'm just wondering if there are any options around making comments that this council is.
so Madam Chair, I'd already written down,
Right.
sorry, I'd already written down that Te Mana o Te Wai's was a specific matter that councillors, and I put ... either took a vote on or wanted to particularly highlight as something that, you know, garnered quite a bit of discussion, which is acknowledging that it's not easy, that there are different points of view. That's as far as I got without saying council took a vote.
Because frankly, like,
Can I get some, is there support for that type of language qualifying what we're putting forward in our
I have a
submission?
question, but I do need to feel my blood
Yeah, yeah.
sugar's going down. Stu raised a point before about this is all my words, but irrelevant because of the other. Yeah, the other one. So, yeah.
Yep.
Trumps it anyway. So is this a purely futile discussion? And I'm trying to denigrate what you're saying, Ben, but if
Part of our region, yeah.
is it pointless?
For part of our region, it's not the whole region.
No.
The third.
Yeah,
Third of
I
the
appreciate that. So, yeah,
let's
let's argue what we.
So I mean,
it's important.
I guess I could live with if you make your suggestion in there that there are different viewpoints on this, and there was discussion and
I'm happy to chat so that we can get some of your words in there as part of the narrative.
right. Are we happy? Are councillors happy that we will reflect that there was fulsome discussion around this particular point?
Yeah.
All right.
as per the motion that I moved, you two will work together.
Yeah.
And also I'd like us to in the vegetable growers put some of the positive suggestions we had further up rather than starting off with we strongly opposed, we recommend it shouldn't be applied.
So just a rejigging of the paragraph.
Rejigging of paragraph.
I'm not too worried. I'm sure they'll come up with it.
Okay. Everybody happy with that approach? I'm just looking around the room. Yep.
Yeah, no, especially because we'll be consistent with a lot of our previous stuff.
All
which
right.
is always what gets thrown at me when I throw up tangents.
Fantastic.
Consistent.
Great. So we've got a motion to, again, Tracy May will gather up the collective view here and we'll get rid of that one. And as we normally do, we delegate the final sign off. All right. Thank you. Councillor Nicol moved and Councillor Downard seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Well done. Well done, everyone. That was a lot to get through, and well done to the staff. I'm going to say it again. Good job. I mean, just the fact you had to write all of that stuff for us, let alone what you had to read. Well done. All right.
Before, Madam Chair, did you want to do that before or after lunch?
Sorry. Well, I know, I'm just checking in with Councillor Kneebone. You've got a. We can adjourn. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. All right. We will continue on then. So we're now going to item 7.4. This is on page 362 of your agenda. This is the submission on National Direction Package 4 going for housing growth discussion document.
Kia ora tātou. Okay, so package 4 is a little bit different from the 3 other packages of national direction change that you've just considered. So it's looking forward to the new resource management system rather than making changes to the current system. So the discussion paper that we were provided outlines some of the key decisions made so far by the government and invites initial feedback to help the government as they make more decisions and further develop the system. So it notes that there will be further opportunity to provide feedback. So when they bring the whole system, new system forward for discussion, we will have another bite of the cherry then. So the discussion document relates purely to their direction for going for housing growth, so it's very targeted in the questions that it asks. The questions start very high level around the new system generally and the role of spatial planning before becoming more specific. So it deals with how we do the housing targets, projections, intensification requirements, etc. So Council's submission recognises the importance of enabling good housing and urban development outcomes and notes that much of the submission reflects this Council's experience as being an active partner of Futureproof. It highlights the importance of spatial planning and providing certainty for land use and infrastructure planning and supports spatial planning having statutory weight. It supports mechanisms for streamlined release of land for housing and for out-of-sequence development, however raises concerns with proposals to remove urban-rural boundaries and prohibiting leapfrogging controls, as this risks creating urban sprawl, infrastructure inefficiency, potential for stranded infrastructure, and reduced public transport viability. The submission emphasises the importance of growth pays for growth and that councils and ultimately ratepayers shouldn't be subsidising unanticipated urban development. It acknowledges that the proposals have potential opportunities for Māori and requests that the new system provides mechanisms for genuinely affordable housing. Finally, the submission comments on options for interim arrangements ahead of the new system coming into force in terms of the current requirements for Tier 1 and 2 councils that we currently have under the NPS for urban development. So that is the overview. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Miffy and team for the submission. Really supportive of what you've got included here. So happy to move the motion. What I've read in here is absolutely consistent with EFIC direction, all the discussion that we've been having this triennium and last triennium as well. Great points in there around recognising centres outside of Auckland in relation to PT and intensification as well. So thank you for including that. Also appreciate your points around affordable housing, that 1 or 2 bedroom units don't quite do affordable housing for bigger families. So great points there. Also growth pays for growth, fantastic. Very timely given the fast track approvals that we're seeing, especially within the Futureproof area. We understand the pressure on our city council and district councils over rates increases, and when you've got PDAs, priority development areas with a clear line of development, and then these fast track ones come in and leapfrog everything, it's a bit hard to fight on every front. So yeah, great points, and yeah, really consistent.